It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I want to begin by saying that today we'll be discussing a very personal and powerful shift that I've been experiencing. It's one that is continuing, and one I'm sure, well, I'm not sure if you're the right age. Many of you might relate to this, but it's a journey, let's say, into the wisdom years. But you're not old enough for that yet. Yeah. So if you're there, you know what I'm talking about. If not, well, maybe I can help you look forward to those gray hairs that are coming. In part, this journey has also been described, as Bob was saying earlier, as the 9-inch journey from head to heart. And as I consider the difference between understanding and that heart knowing, I realize I am shifting so much deeper from belief, which is often simply an opinion about what we're thinking about, to faith, which I see as our heart knowing about our relationship with ultimate reality. This journey has taken me beyond belief into realms of faith I expect will continue. I will continue to explore for the rest of my days. As we know from our teachings, Science of Mind and Unity, as Dr. Ernest Holmes said, life is as broad as the mind can expand. So today, I'll be speaking about how I'm shifting from using our shared teachings to expand my outer experience, to simply resting in the divine, in that divine presence, in the universal mind, which is so much more expansive. For the past 40 years of my life in this teaching, much of my spiritual practice was about expansion into a greater good, manifestation, if you will. My focus was learning, applying, and demonstrating my good, and less about aligning with Source. It was not particularly heart-centered at all. It was stuff, right? So in place of a true heartfelt affirmative prayer, I would rely on a more mind-centered technology for creating my good. And of course, I would proudly declare that this is the most powerful technology known to man. And as a dedicated student of New Thought, and specifically Holmes' teachings within the Centers for Spiritual Living community, I worked hard to master these practices of positive affirmations, spiritual mind treatment, and other forms of affirmative prayer, meditation, and conscious thought. All tools I used, really tools I needed, to hold my fragile little life together, to manage my reality, and to prove my truth. There were shifts, of course, but over the past year or so, there's been an acceleration in my realization that there comes a time of life when the question quietly changes. The language doesn't change, the words just take on a deeper meaning. It moves from how do I apply truth to what happens when I stop trying to apply anything at all. From the Fillmores, we learn that mind, spirit, soul, the very essence of all life expresses through us, whether we recognize it or not. And so we spend the decades of the first phase of life building the container of our lives, carefully crafted to look like all the other containers on the shelf we call Calgary or wherever you might be from. It's built of our identity, our responsibilities to self, to family, and our community. It's measured by our competence, our accomplishments, and for those of us who are in this teaching, by our gaining of spiritual understanding and the resulting improvement in the conditions of our lives. We learn how to manage thought, regulate emotions, align with principle, as well as with community norms. And as you all know, we carry this collective wisdom and our wounds in our bodies, our posture, our habits, muscle memory, reactions, our vigilance, our illnesses, and premature aging. Yet, even in spiritual practice, human striving often creeps in. Holmes reminds us, it's not your purpose to struggle, but to demonstrate the principle of life. And yet, despite the hours in study, perhaps you, like me, easily fell back into demonstrating life by tightly holding ourselves together rather than inhabiting it fully. Until we can't. Until something within us says, enough. That's when we have the opportunity to stop building the container and to begin filling it from within. We can begin to enjoy what has been given and in gratitude call that too enough. I've been contemplating this deeper, more embodied, more mature way to express my spiritual nature for more than a year now, but in many respects, it was through the same old progression. Study, gather information, understand, create a process. But recently, just a month ago actually, I had an experience that challenged my long-standing orientation and absolutely brought me to a standstill. My 40-year slow evolution was suddenly interrupted, and my body spoke. I've been experiencing recurring UTIs. I was on medication pretty much every month for the past year with little relief. I did my best to use everything I know, everything I've learned to deal with the condition, but not even spiritual mind treatment seemed to make a lasting difference. Apparently, the message was, past tense, I wasn't getting to the bottom of it. And after the most recent occurrence in January had cleared up, I found myself with even more severe symptoms, profound exhaustion, coupled with significant muscle weakness, stiffness in my neck and my back, and an overwhelming need to sleep. I was here that Sunday to enjoy Deborah's talk on living from the light, and by the time I returned home, I was feeling pretty dim. I didn't feel ill at all, I was just tired. So I decided to take a hot bath before bed, which was so relaxing, until I realized I didn't have the strength to crawl out of the tub on my own. With Valda's help, I eventually crawled into bed and slept for the next 16 hours. So much for our plans to bounce out of bed and exercise every morning until that we had been doing up until the Christmas interruptions. But what struck me was not the symptoms themselves, but how little it seemed my energetic system could tolerate. Was there an even deeper message that was now using a 2x4 to get my attention? Apparently, these physical symptoms, the exhaustion and weakness, can also relate to a UTI. So I checked in with Louise Hay, as we all do, but I didn't feel her linkage of UTIs with anger and being pissed off were resonating. So I kept digging. Of course, all through this time, all through this past year in particular, I'm very aware, as we all know, that life doesn't happen to us, it happens through us. And so, in a moment of clarity, I thought that perhaps my body was asking me to do something I really hadn't allowed myself to consider, even since retiring a few years ago. It was saying, stop. Stop controlling my experience. Stop directing. Stop managing. Okay. And could it be that this was a time to simply be? So I thought, well, let's study that. So Dr. Sue Morter, who's an author and energy medicine pioneer, is another powerful teacher we've been reading recently. In her book, The Energy Codes, she says, the body doesn't need to be healed, it needs to be included. This did resonate. Could I be the recipient of this raging insistence from my body? You no longer need to hold yourself this way. From the Borders, Dr. Sue and her father, who is a true pioneer and her mentor in energy medicine, I learned that symptoms are not enemies. They are signals of misalignment between awareness and life force. She says, and this really hit me, symptoms arise not because we failed to align with truth, but because we are outgrowing the old ways of alignment. Muscle stiffness, fatigue, exhaustion, she says, are messages from the nervous system to recalibrate, to release the old vigilance, to inhabit rather than control. Inhabit. Not a new idea, but Holmes says your own thought is the only reality you have. Yet sometimes the body reminds us that awareness without embodiment is incomplete. My earlier spiritual practice was more about doing truth, applying principle, and demonstrating understanding. This later phase that I'm being invited into is about something softer and quieter, inhabiting what has already been realized. So, what does this look like? Could it be that it looks like not working to demonstrate my good, not applying thought, not striving, just being, just enjoying what already is? Charles Fillmore reminds us that faith is the knowing that life will carry you in its own rhythm. And Sue Morter encourages when we stop efforting, what's underneath finally gets to reorganize. So I recognize I am being invited into a more mature spirituality, not focused so much on manifestation and creating better conditions in my life, although I'm loving what life has expressed through us. But I'm more and more being called to experience life at a deeper internal level, embodying everything that I already am, both the container and its content, as one. And to simply be spirit, embodying life as it is. My studies, yes, I am still studying, my studies suggest that this is a journey our founders have also taken. I don't know the Fillmore's work as well as Dr. Holmes, but it's clear that over the span of his career, he moved from the process-oriented metaphysics of his early years to an embodied mysticism in his own later years. And in his writings, this isn't overt, but very much implied. Of course, he had the weight of the institution moderating the work that he was doing, his public work of writing and speaking. But what came to me is, could I be emulating the trajectory of his life? Could that journey I'm on be what he was inspiring our teachings to contemplate in his latter years? And there's a true awakening in my heart that this is so. And so now, as I consider this phase of life in a new light, I realize there's a deep invitation to move from the mind to the heart, to gently shift from simply knowing, analyzing, doing, and to add a greater sense of feeling, connecting, and participating. It's both and. It's not either or. And here I must pause to say what has facilitated this quantum leap in learning is being in spiritual partnership with Valda. Valda feels more deeply loves more fully, and exemplifies the true core of our evolving teaching more than anyone I have ever known, and I couldn't have made this journey on my own. And I'm so grateful to her and for her. Give me a moment. So I honor my earlier spiritual work that led me to understanding principle, affirming truth, and to structure my life around aligning with the principles of mind. And while this was essential and right for its time, I worry that it often leaves the body and the heart as secondary participants. Through the work of the Heart Math Institute and one of its great teachers, retired Unity minister David MacArthur, who we met last year at the Unity Church in Ajijic, Mexico, living from the heart is about allowing life itself to move through us, rather than trying to control it with intellect alone. Another author and contemplative Christian teacher I've been reading, Father Richard Rohr, might call this descending into presence, while the Mortars would describe it as including the body's intelligence in conscious awareness. It is here, in the heart, that intuition, joy, compassion, and energy naturally converge, guiding our choices, our movements, and our interactions in ways that mind alone could never orchestrate. To live from the heart is to embrace each moment with openness and receptivity, to engage in our goals, whether in terms of vocation, relationships, health, creative self-expression, or spiritual evolution, with vitality and presence rather than with obligation. It's a maturation of consciousness. The head knows the truth, but it's the heart that embodies it. Holmes, in his later years, in his more mystical works, reminds us the greatest demonstration of spirit is not in argument or understanding, but in how fully it is lived in daily life. Embodiment. The heart-centered focus also invites us to bring compassion to ourselves. The fatigue, stiffness, and limits we elders may feel are not failures. They're gentle teachers. By living from the heart, we learn to honor our needs, to listen to our bodies, to integrate our energy, and all the while continuing to participate fully and joyfully in life. The heart becomes the bridge between knowing and being, between past effort and present ease, between known wisdom and embodied presence. So, what do we do with this idea? For me, it has begun first with heeding the primary lesson to simply allow myself to rest in the loving presence of love itself. And so how does this affect my spiritual practice? From this perspective, all affirmative prayer and spiritual mind treatment in particular can easily evolve with me. Treatment becomes less declarative, corrective, or goal-oriented, and becomes more inclusive, more embodied, and receptive to what already is our truth. Holmes says, "Infinite Spirit does not try to convince you, it invites you to remember." So, our later life spiritual practice encourages affirmations such as, "I allow the loving life force within to express fully as me." I participate in inner coherence rather than controlling outer conditions. I believe later life spirituality also invites us to shift the various ways in which we look at ourselves. Our self-identity moves toward being the presence, allowing coherence with life, both universal and individual, as one. oneness, unity. Not just a concept, a reality to be lived. It's not withdrawal. It's a greater intimacy with life itself. The Fillmores wrote, "Spirit is ever active. It moves through you, whether you demand it or not." This phase invites us to stop organizing reality around the small s self and to rest as life itself, expressing as itself through each of us. So, of course, a practical question that's been coming up for me recently, and I'm sure for many of us, is how do I engage in community and current world affairs from this perspective? When there are so many things I could justly choose to stand against, I realize I am being called to a higher form of engaged awareness and active participation. As an elder, I'm being called to stand the high watch. And from that perspective, I am inspired to clarify and align with what I stand for and who I stand with. So if you notice less interest in striving, a sensitivity to efforting, an attraction to stillness, perhaps even some fatigue, it may not be physical decline, it may be spiritual maturation. And for you who are sensitive to it, it could also be aligned with what's happening energetically on the planet right now. And from that perspective, it can be our call to exercise our innate wisdom, to participate in this deeply transformative stage in the evolution of what it is to be human. My friend Ernest reminds us, you are surrounded by spirit. It is always with you, supporting, guiding, fulfilling. Sue Morter reminds us, the intelligence in your body is not separate from you. It is life teaching you how to be. And I found that belonging, simply embodying the presence of the divine, not feeling the need to prove, control, or to step out, is the proof of this profound truth. For now. I'm open to that changing. And in fact, I feel the energy of something else bubbling up in behind this. But that conversation is for another time.